Welcome, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of what we like to call Chairman's Chat, where we talk with some of our amazing candidates that we have here at the Republican Party. My name is Derek Brown. I'm the chairman of the Utah Republican Party. Thanks for joining us. And our guest today is Congressman Chris Stewart, who represents the 2nd Congressional District, which is, tell us where it goes, because I know it goes all the way down to St. George.
It does. First, Chairman's Chat, thank you. You're doing an incredible job. I really mean that. Thank you. On behalf of lots of people, thanks for what you're doing. It's great to be with you. Yeah, the 2nd District is, in a lot of ways, a jewel of the state. I think it's a jewel of the entire country. We're in my district right now, downtown Salt Lake City. I represent the avenues in some places where they think I'm the devil, right? But
so you go from the avenues to St. George.
I do. I go from the avenues. We go through Davis County, where I live, in Farmington area, west, and then all the way down to St. George, and then all the way east over to the river. So if you look at a map of Utah, it looks like it's about half of the state.
Okay.
And it nearly is.
Because I know you've done a lot of campaign events in St. George,
yeah,
and a lot of meetings as well down there,
yeah,
just through the years.
Well, we spend a lot of time in the rural and southern parts of the district. There's a couple reasons for that. One is it's beautiful and love to be down there. The second reason, though, is because there's so much federal land, they have just enormous problems, enormous issues with the federal government.
Sure.
Davis County, not quite so much. Now, Davis County and Salt Lake obviously have some, but it's not quite so much as some of the rural districts, or rural parts of the district, where it's life or death to them, depending on federal policy.
Those are huge issues. I used to work with, with Senator Lee, and we worked on those issues, PILT and that kind of thing,
exactly,
all the time. So really quickly, just in terms of introduction, something that a lot of people don't know, you hold a world record for something that is, I think, intensely cool, and I think few people know that we have a member of Congress from Utah that holds a world record.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I've ever actually heard the whole, I mean, I'd love the whole story sometime of how you actually did this and what the mechanics, but in, 30 to 60 seconds, can you explain what that is? I know it's really hard.
Okay, I'm going to have to talk real fast. So I was back in the Air Force. Well, first, thanks for giving me a chance to talk about that. It's fun to talk about once in a while. So I actually have 3 world speed records.
Oh, you do?
Yep.
Okay.
And
I didn't know that.
One of them is the fastest nonstop flight around the world.
And that's the one I've heard of.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they are all originated from the same flight. They're just different segments and different things. But anyway, a result of that, we're awarded what we call the McKay Trophy, which is for the most meritorious aerial achievement of the year. So if you go to the Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., there's a trophy regarding that. But we didn't set out to set the world's record. I mean, that wasn't our point. That's not why we have the Air Force. But we are flying these long-distance bombing missions from the United States over to the Middle East and coming back. And we were practicing those kind of missions all the time. And they were like 17 or 20-hour missions, and we'd go over there and drop bombs and come back. And
all in one flight.
Yeah, usually. I mean, once in a while we'd stop in, Guam or some places, but normally we'd come back. And while we were doing that, one time we were preparing for it, I was like, hey, we're about a third of the way around the world. What if we just kept going one time? Let's just go around the world. And we were,
as you do.
Yeah. And we thought we're going to test the air crew, we're going to test the aircraft, we're going to drop bombs, and we did. We dropped bombs on 3 different ranges around the world. And as we're preparing for this, I started wondering, I wonder what the record is for flying around the world. And we looked it up and we go, holy cow, we're going to destroy that record. And so that just kind of, it originated from an operational mission, which it was, but as a result of that, is we did set this world speed record.
Did you have to refuel along the way then?
Oh yeah, 6 times, 6 air refuelings.
And what is the record? So how long did it take you?
36 hours, 13 minutes. The previous record was like 52 hours.
No napping along the way.
No, although
you got a good night's sleep the night before, and
kind of
caffeine and
kind of, yeah. They give you what they call no-go pills, which is to help you sleep, and then they'll actually give you a pill if you really need it to stay awake. But we didn't. But two fun facts on that. One is Brooks Laboratory, which is a physiological lab for the Air Force, will tell you that sitting in an ejection seat aircraft for 1 hour is the same stress on your body as sitting in rush hour traffic for 4 hours. So this 36-hour mission to us felt like 120 or 30 hours, and we were tired. They had monitors set up to us, and they asked me when I landed, did you sleep? And I said no, because we had alternating periods where one of the pilots could sleep. And then they came back about a week later and said, well, you fell asleep here. And I said, well, I didn't know that. They said, you slept for 17 minutes. I said, okay, if you say so. But it was fun.
Oh, that's great. Well, speaking of stress, I have to ask you, another issue that few people know, you sit on the House Intelligence Committee. And I remember that when I used to work, I was counsel for Senator Bennett years ago, and I remember someone with him saying, "Would you ever be interested in leaving banking and going to intelligence?" And he jokingly said, "No, I'd actually prefer to be able to sleep peacefully at night." And he was sort of joking, but not really.
Yeah.
So there's an immense amount of stress, I'm assuming, that goes along with that and the knowledge that you have sitting on that committee. Talk a little bit about what that entails, because few people know. I mean, a lot of the other committees are probably better known in terms of what they're doing. Yours, not so much.
Well, and it used to be particularly true because everything we did, virtually everything, was in a classified setting until, ridiculous Adam Schiff and there was this Russia collusion, which was, and the impeachment, which were both managed through the Intel Committee. But the Intelligence Committee is there to look at what it takes to keep our nation state safe. And we have access to the same information that the President has in the Presidential Daily Brief. And so, in one sense you say, well, does it keep you awake at night? I mean, literally not. I mean, in the sense that I can sleep through a hurricane. But are there things you worry about? I mean, honestly, Derek, if the American people knew some of the things we knew, their jaws would drop and they'd just go,
oh, what are the kinds of things that keep you up then, though? I mean, what are those things that concern you?
I mean, from Intel perspective, those things I couldn't.
I mean, obviously, but from the non-classified side of things, I mean, is it just sort of geopolitical issues going on?
I can just speak generally, is that some of our adversaries have capabilities to harm us that are stunning. And they're things that the American people don't anticipate and we're not really prepared to counter. And it would have enormous repercussions. I mean, like, I'll just talk generally about cyber. I mean, a lot of people think, well, if there's a cyber attack, well, that kind of sucks because, my Amazon orders are going to probably be 2 or 3 days late. Yeah, I mean, and I won't be able to watch Netflix tonight. Yeah, man, that cyber attack's horrible. I mean, the potential of Russia and China and others to, in an incredibly painful way, impact our nation, and they could choose to do it today. They could choose to do it this instant. And they haven't, and there's reasons why they haven't. I mean, those are the kinds of things, and it would be, I mean, an electronic magnetic pulse, an EMP, which is a very real possibility. The Senate reports from that say 100 million Americans starved to death in the first 6 months. This is an incredibly impactful event. This isn't just, like I said,
it's not just theoretical,
Netflix.
too.
Absolutely not. And those are the kind of things you worry about. But I gotta elaborate if I could, and I know we want to keep this short, but look, the thing that keep me awake at night, I worry about Russia, I worry about China, North Korea, etc. But that all hinges on one event prior, and that is, do we stay united as a country?
Yeah.
China's not going to do those things unless they feel like we're vulnerable, and we won't be in a position to respond. And that's the key to this.
And you're on a China task force.
Yeah.
I mean, is that part of what you're doing with that task force?
It was an overlap. It was a separate task force. But that's an incredibly important effort. That will be a generational document for the next 10 to 20 years on how Congress should respond to China. But again, the thing that really terrifies me, and I mean really frightens me, is are we going to fracture our nation to the point that our adversaries say, now is the time? And I'll give you an example if I could. For years, we looked at security forces, Chinese security forces around Hong Kong. They didn't dare move until this spring. And in the middle of the pandemic, in April, 35,000 Chinese security forces moved into Hong Kong. And why did they do it?
Because they
knew we wouldn't respond. And that's the thing that I fear, is that we fracture our nation to the point where our adversaries say, now is the time.
Well, and you've talked a lot about sort of this concept of American exceptionalism. And talk briefly, what is it that makes America exceptional? What is it that makes us unique?
Well, let me tell you before I kind of go into that. I mean, I've been told you can't use that phrase. It offends people, American exceptionalism. I think that's nonsense. You have to be ignorant of history not to recognize that we've played an incredibly positive role in the last 200 years. I mean, unlike anything in the history of the world. And I will never not say that. I will always defend the idea of American exceptionalism. I've been told by my political opponent here that my form of patriotism is exclusionary. At least I'm told he says that. I've never paid much attention to him, but that's what people tell me. What in the world does that mean? You either love your country or you don't. That's not exclusionary. I will never not stand for our flag. And the last thing, again, I know I don't want to go off on a soapbox, but we just can't appreciate what a positive, what an incredible force for good the United States has been. And we can't be shy of saying this is the model for the future of not only the world, for the future of our children now, because a lot of people here in our country are beginning to question, well, maybe we don't want this, maybe we want something else.
Yeah.
And if you want to have that conversation, I'd be happy to defend the idea of why free market capitalism, an American role, and America's leadership is important to the future of our children.
Well, a lot of those folks who believe that, I think, are folks who haven't necessarily lived in other countries,
Yeah.
and they don't understand what is so unique and exceptional about America. And I think you have to sometimes leave a country to look back and go, wow, I mean, we're really doing something right.
Well, I think that's really true, and that's a great point, which is why Utah has, I think, a leading role in being a voice and a proponent for this, because so many of us here in Utah have had the opportunity through different types of service, military, sometimes church service and others, where we really have seen the world in a way that the rest of the nation hasn't.
Yeah, you get to leave and then come back. And
Yeah.
so talk really quickly, you were instrumental in the 988 bill,
Yeah.
which actually originated here in Utah. Our state legislature worked really hard on this, passed this.
Yeah.
And then you took up the baton and made it happen.
Yeah.
Tell us really quickly kind of what that is and what that looks like now.
Well, once again, we're grateful for leadership here in Utah because they lead the nation in many ways. But we needed a national suicide prevention hotline number. You needed to be able to have one number anywhere in the country if you're in the middle of a mental health crisis, if you were considering suicide, or God forbid, one of your children, your roommate, your spouse, that you would be able to call someone and get immediate help. And there are resources, but no one knew what the number was. And the number was different if you're in St. George and if you're in Salt Lake than if you're in California or New York. We needed that national number, 988, and it will save thousands of lives. There's no question.
That's great.
Will save thousands of lives.
That's great. Well, thank you for doing that. And I know that I've talked to legislators who have also commended you for doing that, kind of picking that up and running with it.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. For me, when I was running for election, the hardest thing in the world was when someone said, why should I vote for you? And I would always say, well, do you have 10 minutes, 20? No, 30 to 60 seconds.
Yeah.
How do you condense it down? So I'm going to ask you the same thing. For the folks that live in the 2nd District here in Utah, why vote for Chris Stewart?
And that's a common question, and honestly, like you said, it's a little uncomfortable. If you have any sense of humility, it's hard to stand before people and say, vote for me because I'm the coolest thing in the world, right? And at the end of the day, it comes down to, I think, two things. Do you want someone who tries to have integrity, someone who tries to be honest, and someone who tries to listen to people and to help them? And I've tried to do that, but it's more than that. It's more than just a character. I mean, do you believe that life is worth protecting? Do you think America is worth protecting and worth defending? Do you think that it's important for us to treat all people fairly, but also recognize, well, what are the policies that are necessary to do that? How do we actually do that? Take it from an idea to something that actually matters and we can implement. Do you think it's important to defend our nation? I'm talking about from the threats around the world. I mean, I could go on, and most of the people in this district feel the same way that I do on those things. Most of the people in the district, I recognize not all of them, believe me, I hear from them all the time. But if you feel those way, then I think that I would be the person they would want to support.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. This is Congressman Chris Stewart, who does a phenomenal job, and not just for Utah, but nationally. I was in a room not long ago with Kevin McCarthy, who is essentially the top Republican in the House of Representatives, and he made the comment that Utah sort of punches above our weight, and he was looking at you when he said that, and I remember that distinctly. He talked about the influence that Utah has that's out of proportion to the size, and for that reason, I'd recommend, obviously I'm the chairman of the party, but recommend everyone watching to re-elect Congressman Stewart. He's done amazing things, and as you've talked about today, just a lot going on. And so thank you for joining us. Be sure to for those of you who are watching, ballots arrive next week, believe it or not. So I know it feels like it's a long ways away, but they'll hit your mailboxes next week. So be sure to fill them in, return them as soon as you get them, and thanks again. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for being here today.